Mayor Pardon,
Here.
Vice Mayor Gore, Counselor Joyner,
Here.
Counselor Harris,
Here.
Counselor Denton,
Here.
Counselor Pelham. Here. And Counselor Holloway.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. We're going to first start off with Secretary Cummings. I believe you would like to do some opening remarks.
Thank you. Appreciate the chance to be here in front of all of you, and we're here to talk to you about the work that has been done by our consultant Alvarez and Marcel. But before we do that, I want to do a little bit of a walkthrough of how we got to where we are today, so you understand why we're here and what we're trying to do to help the city of Hopewell. Our office was first made aware of the situation late last summer, and that came through the Commonwealth Auditor of Public Accounts, who is responsible for auditing all localities. We also had heard from some of your industrial ratepayers about some concerns they had on wastewater rebates that they felt were still due to them, but couldn't be paid due to lack of audit. So through conversations with the auditor, with the controller, who's here today, Randy McCabe, Randy, and I should have introduced my Deputy Secretary Markowitz, who have been very deeply involved in this along the way. Through those conversations, it was very clear that there's a very serious problem with the financial controls and accounting for the city of Hopewell, and that was, while cash seemed to be okay and bills were being paid, that it was a problem in terms of being able to function going forward in the long term, and actually the ability to continue to fund the city without access to any independent financing sources as you continue. So Section 4.8.03 of the Appropriation Act directs the Auditor of Public Accounts to establish a prioritized early warning system for localities that are struggling from a financial standpoint, and it is clear are teetering in terms of potential financial distress. Hopewell's been delayed each year in submitting its financial statements, preventing the APA from having anything to audit. And so this was part of their escalation of the early warning on the problems that were taking place. The Commonwealth has a local government fiscal distress process. This was created as a result of the city of Petersburg's financial problems in 2016. And since then, it has been implemented one other time, which was for the town of Bristol, due to a landfill problem that they had, which I think is pretty widely known. So in December of 2022, the Auditor of Public Accounts made their formal recommendation that the city of Hopewell was experiencing fiscal distress. There's a process associated with this, and that the Commonwealth should consider providing state assistance to help address these problems. Specifically, the Commonwealth, in consultation with the money committees of the House and the Senate, who were brought into this, we helped put together a plan for state assistance and funding to focus on deploying a turnaround financial specialists to provide a current state assessment and a turnaround plan. We interviewed a number of firms, consultants, 3 or 4 that we had our own direct interviews with to determine who we thought was the best qualified, and we ended up hiring Alvarez and Marcel. Alvarez is a very well-known firm. They're actually headquartered in New York, and they are noted for their expertise in financial turnaround and performance improvement, in particular in corporate world, but also in government sectors. And our lead on this is Nancy Zilty, who is right here. She'll introduce herself. But I think you'll find that the experience of the firm, but more importantly, the experience of the team that has done this exercise is really impressive. They've been in government. They have extensive expertise in working with many different localities and helping to return them to strong financial position. So that they've completed their work, a six-week engagement funded by the Commonwealth, by out of the general fund. I think that's an important thing for everybody to know. This fund was set aside, $750,000, sits in the budget that is available to be deployed for situations like this. And the sole purpose is to help in these kinds of situations, people to get back on their feet. So this engagement was a $350,000 engagement, not cheap, but it's something that everybody feels is a priority for us to make sure that we can help in righting a ship that needs some external support. I want to make this very clear that our role in this was helping the process move along to get to the point when we came to meet with all of you in December you don't have to have us come in, but everybody concurred it would be a good idea to get the independent viewpoint. We appreciate that. We are truly here to help. We were not a part of any of the due diligence. Obviously, we supported Alvarez and Marcel in helping them direct them to the right place, but they are completely independent, doing their own work, and that's the report that they are delivering to all of you tonight. So with that, I want to turn it over to Nancy Zielke, the Managing Director at Alvarez Marcel, and she's going to walk through the summary of the report and the conclusions. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Cummings, Mayor and City Council, and City Manager Macker. My name is Nancy Zielke. I am the Managing Director with Alvarez & Marsal's, our Public Sector Services State and Local Government Practice. As the Secretary indicated, Alvarez & Marsal, we're a known corporate as well as local government business consulting firm as well as a turnaround firm helping entities improve their financial and operational results. A little bit about my background. I'll introduce the two people who will be with me tonight to go over our high-level findings with you. Again, my name is Nancy Zielke. I've been with A&M for 16 years. Prior to coming to A&M, I worked in local government for 25 years. I served in CFO positions in the Midwest in Kansas City, as well as with the University of Missouri. My background is in the area of public finance, budgeting, and improving financial conditions of organizations. Since joining A&M, I've worked on over 50 process or efficiency improvement, as well as improving financial operations for local governments, many of them similar to City of Hopewell as here. Additionally, I'm very active in an organization called Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, who basically promote best practices within local government. In fact, when I was still in local government, I was served as their national president. With me this evening is Ingrid Gardner. Ingrid will be talking to us this evening about internal controls. Ingrid has an extensive background as well. She's an accountant by trade. She's been with A&M for about 15 years, 16 years as well. She's worked on many forensic accounting reviews, policy reviews, internal control reviews, as well as served as expert witness on many engagements very similar to this. Additionally, from afar is one of our other partners. His name is Ian Smith. Ian, like Ingrid, is also a CPA, has worked extensively on local government as well as corporate government financial improvement practices. He's part of our CFO advisory services. So I'm going to call on him later in the presentation. So if you hear this voice from afar, so Ian, let's just make sure that it works here. Can you just speak real quick?
Good evening. This is Ian Smith.
Okay, very good. So Ian had some family matters and could not join us tonight, but he'll be part of the presentation. First of all, we want to thank the Mayor and the City Council for allowing us to spend the time with your staff over the past 6 weeks. We began this journey back on March the 27th. In fact, we started before that. Even before we started the engagement, we started putting together information requests and meeting with Dr. Manker and her staff as it relates to the type of information that we need. So over the past 6 weeks, we've met with your staff. In fact, we have met with over 50 of your city employees as well as community stakeholders to understand the operations, understand the challenges that you're facing currently as well as in the future. We also looked at the past because in order to improve, to look forward, you have to understand your past. So we spent time visiting with the staff of the challenges they had. So the first slide of the presentation this evening, the Secretary Cummings, I believe, excuse me here, I think I'm. covered, but, some of the initial concerns, as the Secretary had stated, as were identified back in December by the Auditor of Public Accounts. There were concerns as it relates to the delays in the completion of your audits. There are concerns as it relates to the withdrawal of your credit rating, back, I believe, in 2015. There's been significant delays in the annual rebate to your utility and major industrial customers, those not being complete due to, again, the delay in the audit. Secondly, there was also concern by the Commonwealth, by the Auditor of Public Accounts, as it relates to ensuring that the monies you receive from the federal government for COVID, for CARE monies, again, all of those COVID dollars, to make sure that they're being used properly. Thirdly, and finally, before I move on, is the fact that back in 2015-16, we implemented a new financial system. They had concerns or observations that possibly there were some problems with that implementation. So we did a high-level review of that as well. And then finally, also then to verify, the level of training and level of training of your staff. As I stated, our journey started back on March the 27th, where we were asked to take a look at 4 major tasks. I've kind of just tried to paraphrase those for you. First of all is the audit task. We look to see, as it relates to what's causing the delay. What's causing the delay in the completion of your annual financial reports, your annual audits, and take a look at the internal controls related to that. Secondly, we were asked to take a look at trying to assess the financial health of the city and its component units. In this case, we were not as successful as we wanted to be because in many cases, some of the information was not readily available, meaning the financial information that we wanted to see. But however, we do have some comments that we will be addressing to the City Council tonight regarding the overall financial health. The Commonwealth also asked us to take a look at the organization structure, taking a look at the Finance Department, the Treasurer's Office, those departments that primarily handle the cash and monies for your organization. Take a look at those organizations and where could we see improvements, not only in the org structure itself, but also the processes. So we looked at your processes as it relates to your budgeting process. We looked at your procure to pay. We looked at your your billing to cash, as well as your policies and procedures. And we have some improvement recommendations of how you can improve upon those moving forward. And then finally, our fourth area is kind of a combined area. We looked at we performed an analysis on the wastewater treatment facility, the rebate program. We did a budget analysis as it relates to that to understand, again, what has been the delay. And are there some maybe options that are available for City Council as well as the Wastewater Commission to maybe jumpstart or move forward those rebates? Then finally, we looked at kind of the 2 tranches or the 2 funding sources that are coming to the city from the COVID funds, the CARES monies, as well as what I call the COVID monies, the monies from the state and local government relief funds. We took a look at the spending of those and making some recommendations on some improvements as well. So tonight what we're going to try to do, we're going to take about 30 minutes and try to go through this 161-page report very quickly for you. I know City Council members, I think, received copies of this earlier this week. I believe that, Dr. Manker, this is now posted on the city's website as well. Yes. We're not going to go through every page, but for the City Council, what I'd like to do is highlight some of the specific recommendations related to that. Like I said, our approach is first we assess, we document, and we identify improvements. Our assessment process, first of all, we go through interviews. And interviews as well as reviewing data. Any recommendations we present, they're fact-based. They're not based on hunch. They're not based on, what we think should be done. Our approach is fact-based, driven recommendations and work plans. Additionally, we also relied on information that was provided by the city. So going back from the initial request we made back in March the 24th, we received about 60% of the information that we requested. So even though in some cases we did not have all the information we would have liked to have had, we still feel very confident that we're providing to you this evening is a solid roadmap to really lead the city moving forward to improve the financial sustainability and long-term health of your community. So first of all, the executive summary on the observations and the findings. You know, first of all, we visited with your audit firm, as well as we visited with your finance staff. And the fact that what we found is that the financial problems, material weaknesses, the control weaknesses that were cited in your past audits are still in place. Many of them are still unresolved, including, which I think is very important for City Council to realize, the deficiencies in the internal controls, the processes, as well as the procedures. In some cases, there has been improvement. In the past, there were some problems as it relates to some of your component units and getting solid information and coordination with your component units, primarily the schools. From talking with the auditors, that has improved. You know, secondly, I know the audit has still not been provided, unless it's been provided today. I looked on the website earlier. Initially, we were told it was supposed to have been provided April the 30th. As of, again, like I mentioned, we looked earlier today. It looks like the due date is now at the end of the month. It is highly likely, as we talked with your audit firm, that this year's audit is likely to be a qualified audit again. And the fact that moving forward, that your 23 and probably your 24 audit will be highly qualified as well, unless you do two things or three things. Address the internal controls, address material weaknesses, and be more timely with the submission and completion of your audits. In fact, if you talk to industrial bankers or the rating agency, the fact that in order to to go back into the market, because as we have heard from many of you, the fact that you need to be able to go out and borrow money. You need to go out and borrow general obligation, GO bonds, or revenue bonds to fund capital. Well, to do that, you're going to have the credit rating back. And to do that, you need more than just 1 year. You're going to have to show the good faith of the community and the fact that you're consistent in your audit, in your financial practices. You have policies in place, you have procedures in place, as well as that you're consistent and timely in the completion of this. It was unclear to us as we looked at your financials when we visited with the staff of whether or not you're doing month-end closings or even kind of a consolidated year-end closing process. So there's lots of improvement, significant improvement that's needed in that area. Financial health, I mentioned this a few minutes ago. We were unable to really perform what we really wanted to do, was to basically benchmark the city of Hopewell against other Virginia cities of similar size. We want to be able to take a look at and better understand what is the true cash position of the city today, as well as understand what's the fund balance, meaning what's the monies available to city council to fund future initiatives. We saw some discrepancies or inconsistent application as a reporting of obligations. Ian will talk about that in a few minutes. Deferred maintenance, as well as just the absence of planning for long-term capital improvements. We're very surprised that you did not have a multi-year long-term financial plan, a multi-year plan that forecasts out revenues and expenditures. Cities of your size should have in place multi-year financial plans, as well as cash flow was not in place. Workload challenges. You have a very dedicated work team. The individuals we talked with the finance department, we talked with the treasurer's office, as well as we had a focus group with over 20 of your various department leaders. And the fact they're very dedicated and they really want to do what's right. But at the same time, we heard from them the real need for additional training. Additional training not only in the financial system, but training in how they do their jobs from the financial management side. Policies and procedures, it's one of your audit findings. We saw some of them existed, but not addressing to the full breadth of what is needed in the place. Wastewater treatment. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, you're 4 years behind in processing the rebates to your industrial, commercial customers. And part of the reasoning for that is because of the incompletion of the audit. We're going to be suggesting to you maybe a different temporary solution moving forward until the audits are caught up. As it relates to the grants and processing, As Dr. Maneker indicated to us, the former city manager had provided to the department heads a overview of the sources or the uses of the funds. But at the same time, we did not see in place kind of the control system or the broad understanding or even the training to your departments of what those COVID dollars, whether the CARES monies or the relief funds, what they could actually be used for. I think what's important is, and we'll talk about this, Ingrid's going to talk about in the critical action plans, we went through the prior year audits. In fact, we provided in the appendix of the document kind of a listing going back to 2014 of all of the material weaknesses that were cited. Instead of having you to have to read through those, we kind of combined them. But what we found is over the past, from 14 to 18, over 43 different sightings have been made. We have made some progress in some of those, but what we found is that 84% of the findings that have been out there for the past 5 years still have yet to be addressed. Additionally, as in the report itself, you'll see on page 17 or page 17, kind of a listing. I think this is important to City Council that over the past 6 years, you've had a rotation, or you've had some changes in your external audit firm as well. In fact, we saw that you've had 3 different external auditing firms in the past 6 years with information in the back, as well as the same related to the Single Audit Act. So what we're going to do real quickly, I want to be very cognizant of time. I told Dr. Maneker we're going to take 30 to 45 minutes here. We're going to go through the recommendations. We identified 27 strategic improvement recommendations and over 460, I would say, actions and critical steps that are needed. In fact, the document itself is laid out. The fact we first did an assessment. We did what's called a show. A lot of people call them SWOTs. I didn't necessarily like that term. So we did what was called a show. We looked at the strengths, the hurdles, the opportunities, and the weaknesses. And that was kind of our basis for, kind of our findings. And that was based on interviews. That was also based on the analysis of the information provided. From that, then, we put together our recommendations. Like I said, 4 task areas that included 27. So I'm going to go very quickly over the first one, which is the audit status. So first of all, what we've recommended that moving forward to address, to get the city caught up, the fact that you kind of create 2 separate work streams here, that you bring in a financial turnaround PMO, a group of individuals to basically focus on helping get the audits caught up, creating what we call the critical action plan, creating your policies and procedures, and completing the reconciliations. Because you're not going to be successful in completing those future year audits and getting clean opinions if you don't get caught up in your reconciliations. Right now, you're 2 years behind in reconciling your cash to your bank statements, as well as there are some, I would say, inefficiencies as are related to how you're reconciling back to your munis, your financial system. So some improvements, some catch up, and some would say refocus and redirection in that area. We've also recommended in recommendation within task 1, the recommendation here is the fact that you bring in I would say a short-term team, a team of maybe 4 to 6 individuals to help on those reconciliations. Right now, you have 1 person that's dedicated in the city treasurer's office to do that. They need help. And they need help in a timely manner, especially if you want to try to complete and get current with your audits over the next 12 months. Kind of the second major area that I'm not going to go through all the recommendations, I'm just going to kind of hit on some of the high ones, is the real need to complete the critical, implement what's called critical action plans. Again, areas to address your material weaknesses and the internal controls. I'm going to have Ingrid talk a little bit about what is a critical action plan and the importance of that.
Good evening. So I will be really quick as well, but it's a pleasure to be here and present in front of all of you, so thank you. So really and truly, the critical action plan is just, it's a tool that you use to make sure that all of these very important steps that need to be taken for the to track your audit findings and how to correct them are being followed judiciously to make sure that you're tracking, identifying who's going to track them, how long is it going to take, and to make sure that you're following it with fidelity so that you can move past sort of these recommendations and actually implement them into your system. And the importance of that is really that if you don't address all of these findings from the last few audits, then what happens is you'll never get to a point where you can actually have a clean audit going forward. You need to be able to address those issues, make sure your systems are up to date, make sure all of the entries that need to be made that the auditors have identified in your previous audits, that they've been taken care of. And I think the best way to do that is to have a really detailed plan of attack, tracking who's going to do it, when, and stick to it with fidelity. I think the other piece of that that's really important is really to show that there's action being taken, that there's a process to report that up on a regular basis to senior leadership to make sure that they can see that there's actions being taken and that progress is being made.
Secret. The rest of recommendations, first of all, I need to say that Mr. Terry did share with us he's starting to plan for the fiscal year 20 audit already. In fact, he shared with us some of the information that's already being collected. In fact, what we did learn is the fact that some of the different component units are providing to that directly to your audit firm. Again, some improvements that could be made in the centralization. Again, having your finance director kind of be the gatekeeper as it relates to that information. Already talked about the need for monthly closing. Again, making sure you reconcile that cash, reconciling those accounts on a monthly basis moving forward. Then finally, we visited with the schools, because again, the schools is a big portion of your budget, their component unit, and they're having some challenges. Again, a large portion of their budget is funded with federal grants, and we would encourage the city council to have discussions with the schools of possibly having them complete a separate audit. So again, they're a component unit, their financials roll into yours, but that way they could at least maybe start jump-starting if your audit's going to take a little longer, at least allow for their financials to move forward to help them address some of the federal compliance requirements that they have with their audits. Recommendation 2 really dealt with the financial health. Like I said, we were unable to complete the full assessment as we wanted to complete, but we did take a look at the current financials and some of the kind of trends. We took a look at your balance sheet. We took a look at doing some comparisons between the 18 audit with the CAFR, as well as we did some analysis on the bank statements. So I'm going to ask my colleague Ian Smith just to talk briefly about some of the, I would say, inconsistencies and some of the areas for improvement that we cited. So Ian?
Yeah, and as my colleague Nancy Zielke mentioned, one of the things that we wanted to try and accomplish in this financial health section was really an analysis of what are the current liabilities and what are the current assets, and do we have enough, current assets to meet current liabilities? That's a very basic test that you want to do when you're evaluating kind of the financial health of an organization. And because of these unaccrued liabilities as it relates to the wastewater rebates, we weren't able to get a clear picture on that. And so there's definitely some work to be done around timely accruals around the wastewater rebates. The fact that the audit hasn't been done is not a reason for not having those accruals done. The auditors are just there to give an opinion on the financial statements. They do not have the responsibility that management has of actually producing the financial statements, including those accruals. A couple of other things that I think are just sort of important to understand. We talk about sort of measuring and monitoring the financial health. There were a few things that kind of stood out to us. One was we had some challenges with reconciling Munis balances in 2018 with your published financial statements. We had challenges comparing the cash balances that are, in your bank statements with Munis balances, looking at more recent periods. in 2020.